Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dicing with Death. How you doing, Ryan?
Hello. I gave some pro tips on fixing lighting last week, and on watching the VOD, I uncovered that the lighting wasn't bad enough. Had to flip the room. So here we are, troubleshooting in action. As a special bonus for the special Necromancy edition of Dicing with Death, we have decided to give you a behind-the-scenes look of the recap recording process. 100% intentional, 100% fine.
It's authentic. It's beautiful. So, we're ending Mousefer. He's accomplished all of his goals. He's done everything he ever wanted in life. He almost won D&D, if you could, because you can't really win, but as close as you can get. He's won Dungeons and Dragons, and it was advanced.
Yeah.
He's not in Roll20, and that's okay.
What's going on in Roll20? What would I do there?
I don't even know. Look at a map and point at it with me and go, oh, look at this over here.
I'm pulling up my spreadsheet to do a proper recap. You can hope maybe you can do the same. I feel like that bears our attention.
Yeah.
Let me pop into Roll20.
Let's talk about the Necromancer class. We made some changes as we went along, but how do you feel it was from a player standpoint?
I had fun with this campaign. I hope you did too.
Well,
was it good for you, Neal? Was it good for you, viewers?
It was good for me, baby. But the class, separate from the campaign experience itself, what did you think?
Sorry, I'm trying to log into Roll20. I'm definitely not evading the question.
Just can't type and talk at the same time. I get that.
Isn't that science or something?
Typing and talking at the same time? Do you have to manually put in your password every time you log into Roll20? How is it not just like a Roll20.com then join campaign?
It
.net,
apparently does not remember me, and I wasn't planning on rolling any dice. So,
well, maybe you don't need to be in.
Damn it! At this point, I'm doing it.
Do it.
Actually, I'm in. All right, launch game. And proceed to not need Roll20, but to need my Necromancer class PDF. So the Necromancer class. You're asking me.
What'd you think of it?
What I think of it?
Yeah,
I thought it was a fun class, and there were a number of key, class attributes or strengths or whatever features of the class that I thought were interesting and fun to engage with, and particularly well suited for this solo campaign. I think it felt more like a villainous class, as I think it should be, right? Like this almost seemed like a cool way to roll out and like make a PC statted necromancer, but this sort of thing is much more suited for a villain, right? So the one cool thing that I think it did was mechanized the aspects of the class we wanted to explore: the necromancy, the soul eating, and undead raising. Well, I mean, zombie raising is just like self-evident why that would be fun,
right?
But like turning years of life into a resource.
I think that was pretty
incentivized necromancy. Mission accomplished. Right, I think this kind of built off of the Georg campaign with the Amulet of Malchus, but
definitely a source of inspiration
into the class itself.
Yeah. I keep wanting to interrupt you with my thoughts, but I should just let you speak. I'm sorry.
Let me rant. I've been rambling for a few minutes, so you care to Care to respond? Go ahead.
It feels like the counterplay to the paladin, because at least in second edition, paladins are like goody two-shoe we shouldn't say that, but like super lawful good, and they're there to do good in the world. And if you do anything bad, you like lose your paladin status permanently. And if you did something bad while under the control of someone else, you lose it temporarily and have to like fight to be good. And I know the paladin class has been really cool, and people have always been frustrated that paladins are such goody two shoes. But I kind of dig that some classes play to certain alignments or personality traits, and so the Necromancer class really felt to me like, you know, we've had good classes with good people, and here is a class that is like undoubtedly evil. But rather than trying to arbitrarily say if you do a good thing you fail, I tried to build it in such a way that to be a successful necromancer you would have to do pretty terrible things. And I'm sure if someone could play this class and be a good person with it,
or look at certain features of the class. I mean, there were some abilities that came along that I think are interesting, inspirational, like outside of the context of the class of the campaign. You know, like the necrograph, for example, that came up in the recap. That could be spun as a good, maybe not a good act, but like you can weigh the good with the evil, and argue that performing a necrograph on the blacksmith is a good act or soldier. So there, aspects of eating souls, I think it's probably hard to justify, but even then there was like giving the life of the infirm child for the sacrificing that the soldier might might walk again. And if you believe in mercy killing, you know, you could harvest the souls of those that are needing to die or wanting to die to fuel your other magics. So I think, I tried to make the class so that you would be not very good in a toe-to-toe fight. And I think we saw a couple of times some toe-to-toe fights here not work out. How did that I certainly felt that. That was mostly the wizard Thaco in action. Because there are a number of necromantic abilities that are useful in toe-to-toe combat. The big thing big ability that saved this as a solo campaign, well, I guess there are two, but one is spirit armor as a combat ability. That is a remarkable defensive ability, and I think a good example or inspiration for how to make a solo character more survivable in an interesting narrative way, right? The spirit armor spell basically extends the durability of a single character in filling the same role that Zweihard's armor filled, right? Soaking up damage. And the reason I said there, and then the second thing would be that the minions, right? Undead minions, animated minions, which also soak up damage, extend the durability of a solo character,
and give you some way to battle enemies without putting yourself in the front line.
So those aspects made this, I mean, I think are another key feature of the class. So one being the souls years, whatever, as resources, as well as HP, right? I mean, HP is already obviously a resource in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
But being able to interact with that more directly, like draining HP to boost your own and blah, 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 was a different take on healing mechanics, HP mechanics.
Yeah, I thought that'd be particularly fun, because then you can only make yourself stronger by making yourself weaker first. And it's a nice interplay that if you want to like cast a spell, you have to weaken yourself to do it, which is something I've always wanted out of my spellcasters, is the like each spell that you cast slows you down or hampers you in some way.
So I think this is a good way to mechanize a lot of that black magic-y stuff, sacrifices, that theme of sacrifices and tributes came up quite frequently. And I think it's, a cool, innovative approach to, black magic necromancy. So I think there's a lot of good stuff here in this necromancy class.
Yeah, for years in my campaigns, I've sort of like tentatively worked with a little bit of blood magic here and a little bit of blood magic there, and I wasn't sure how to make it work. And I think this is like the definition of blood magic.
At least for now. It feels like the culmination of a lot of those.
That's the right way of saying it. Yeah.
Not that there's not tinkering to be done.
Certainly. There's always more to be done. There's nothing...
Dark magics to unlock, explore.
Mm-hmm. Not perfect yet. Nothing is. I'm trying to find my notes.
So,
Can't find my notes.
Have you decided what you're going to do with this class? Are you still putting off making a decision? Is this class to be released?
So,
is it a release date to be determined? What are your where are we putting that at the end of this?
So at the end of the day, if there's not a necromancer actively playing to build the class on, I just know I'm never going to finish fleshing it out, right? If Malcifer stops here, I'll probably just stop working on the necromancer class, which, it's not perfect. It could be finished out. There's a lot of cool stuff left to do with it.
And there's more stuff to come back to. And Malcifer isn't dead.
Right.
He'll never die. He's master of death, right? Until he does. Until we decide to. Anyways. So there's and like I'm sure, right? This isn't the last. Like, right? I don't know. There will be mummies in future Koibu campaigns, right? The high level necromancy stuff is not off the table.
Yeah.
So I think so I guess what's your take on the rest of the class features? Is this PDF going anywhere? Is it going up on Real Goblins? Or are you not ready to publish this stuff yet? Are you going to keep it as your private DM?
I would like to publish
Undead Army
it.
Generator document.
There are certainly NPCs around that are following this class, so maybe we'll flesh it out through there.
I think that's a fair approach, right? We've seen plenty of the low-level stuff leaked through this playtest. Through, and Nick did a one-session playtest of his own corpse maker.
So, generally, I was thinking...
go ahead.
I was going to say that they were going to be when we create undead minions, I want to talk about undead minions for a moment. When we create undead minions, there are 4 intelligence categories for them. There's basic, simple, advanced, and complex. And my end goal was to have... Oh, and there's also 3 different types of undead. There's zombies, skeletons, and ghosts, right? Skeletons are obviously skeletons, zombies are skeletons with flesh still on them, and ghosts are incorporeal. It's the 3 different states of decomposition. And I wanted to have 2 different types of undead, so like 2 different zombies and 2 different skeletons and 2 different ghosts for each level of intelligence in the end. So like you would have your basic zombie, and then you would have like the more advanced version of the basic zombie would be the large. And then you have the zombie with simple intelligence, which would be the ghoul, and then the like more advanced version of the simple intelligence would be the nightmare. And then you'd have your advanced intelligence zombie, which would be a revenant, and then your secondary advanced intelligence version of the zombie would be like the zombie lord. And then your complex intelligence would be your mummy, and your secondary complex version, your greater intelligence. Your greater complex intelligence would be your greater mummy. And I sort of have that I've got the zombies fleshed out, the skeletons sort of fleshed out. I'm just not sure where to put the Death Knight. It belongs in there somewhere, and I haven't figured it out yet.
There could be exceptions to your outline.
Yeah.
Right. And every undead creation is unique, right? I think we joked at one point about having a nerf on the Necromancer where you have to name each of your zombies when you raise them. Zombies you can raise.
Yeah, in order to remember which ones are which, they have to follow.
Yeah, I was talking about this Malcifer spreadsheet, and then I got distracted logging into Roll20. It seems like as good a time as any to look at this guy here and see what this campaign 9 levels of necromancy brought us. So right now the population of, I guess the armies of winter on Gadia there's 510 raised dead.
Is that your total number of raised?
Total number raised and living or undead at the moment.
We don't have like a head count on the total number of undead he created throughout the whole
I do not,
campaign.
because I was deleting them as they were destroyed.
Which makes sense.
Throughout the whole campaign, I wouldn't guess it's probably 1,000-ish. We would have to. That's not even worth calculating. Don't you viewers dare do that? It seems like a terrible waste of time.
Yeah.
So, right, there's a couple companies of skeletons, dozens of zombies, higher level skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the spreadsheet's there. The army's still around. I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised if. Well, we'll see. Right, what happens to the horde?
Yeah. So the other fun thing. Okay, so we've already talked about creations. I sort of broke the class abilities into the Necromancer class into 3 sections of abilities. You've got your abilities, which cost nothing, pretty much to do. You just do it. Then you've got
These are such abilities as being able to eat souls or drain life,
or know the lifespan of a creature.
Yeah, interesting divination type undead abilities. Yeah, like
being able to like lick someone's blood and know who they were. Siphoning souls. Yeah. Then we've got the creations where you raise things, and then we've got like straight up spells, and that's the sort of way that I wanted to break it down. And we got to a bunch of cool stuff, but like the really cool stuff comes into play right around where we are here. The spell sensitivity to life, which we got at level 8, but didn't really get to use.
We talked about it. That's the one where you into your eyes to get infravision. And right, we ran out of campaign before we got a chance to see those abilities in action.
Yeah, there are. I think there's probably a few that I want to highlight. I don't think I want to share them all, but there's probably a few future ones I want to talk about. But let me find them while you prattle.
Not sure what I had in mind to prattle out. I mean, let's see. I don't know. I mean, I'll go. Are you ready?
Yeah, I got something. So at 9th level, we get is it a spell or an ability? It's an ability called Satisfy Hunger. I'm just going to read out the ability to you. By eating the heart of a creature with a similar soul size, the caster can permanently increase their max HP by 1. This number is limited only by the character's maximum potential HP, the amount of HP the caster would have if they rolled max on all of their hit dice.
Oh, did I just hit level 9, or did I...
You just hit level 8.
Okay, so we're not even level... Okay, level 9 has mummies and this cool ability. Oh, wow. So for Malsper, for example, he is a level... At level 9, his max HP would be 9 times 6. The D6 is the Necromancer for HP.
So you could have 54 HP total.
So you could eat hearts until you farm up to 54 HP.
Right. Yeah. The requirement for the spell can be obtained after using Vampiric Touch on a creature. After gorging on the heart, the caster must spend a day of bed rest while their body absorbs and transforms. Gains in HP are all in the spiritual plane, imbalancing the caster's anima. Without enough life force to shield the spiritual force, the caster begins to grow weak to sunlight, first suffering combat penalties, eventually taking damage, and finally being destroyed by sunlight. So the idea is that you eat other people and then you use their spiritual force to tack it on to your actual physical force. But then you've got so much spiritual force out there. There's a lot of weird interplay between spiritual and life force throughout this document. But the idea is that you can eat people's hearts until you become, maximum potential HP, and then we get the counterplay of, but you grow weak to sources of positive energy.
As soon as you've used this ability, you are now sensitive to sunlight.
Well, yeah.
Lets you eat a heart.
I mean, it says the caster begins to grow weak and then suffering combat penalties and taking damage and finally being destroyed, but it wasn't fleshed out.
But if you have used this ability to increase your max HP, you take that penalty, whether you've eaten one heart or
Right. One of the things I'd like to flesh out is, how many hearts, how much hunger do you need to satisfy before how much do you need to eat before sunlight destroys you? How much do you need to eat before, you take D8 damage, right? So that the specifics need to be fleshed out, but the concept is there in full.
Yeah, it would probably be. If we had gone through this with Mousefur, you probably would have left it vague, and we would have gradually described descent into vampirism.
Something like that. You start eating some hearts, and then one day, you get sunburned really easily, and the next, you keep eating more hearts, and pretty soon you start stepping out into the sunlight, and it actually hurts right away instead of just being sunburned, and so forth and so on. Yeah. And that's very similar to the sensitivity to life, where you consume, you enchant yourself with spiritual magic and then grow weak to life force and high energy things. And that's the later progression of the class. And these are also optional things that you don't have to do, but once you head down this route, this path, you can get really, really powerful as a character in exchange for trading off a different weakness. And I that it's not just you're better, but there's a trade to be had, and you can pick and choose which trades you want to make depending on your class. If you rolled really well on HP, maybe you don't eat hearts.
Yeah. And right.
Yeah.
And same with the sensitivity to life. I think in Mousefur's case, it may have been handy to have infravision working with undead, but this is something I've mentioned over the course of the campaign, is I can imagine necromancers making use of only some of the necromancy abilities, right? Or even pulling out one of these abilities or these animations and throwing it into a campaign to spice things up, even without making use of the full class. So, yeah. So the example I think that I had brought up previously was a more warrior-focused necromancer, which Mousefur kind of was. Mousefur had high strength, things like that. So and you were talking about these abilities being inherently evil, but you could use features of this class and never animate an undead.
Totally.
And just have a high strength, high dex, high con necromancer that's using spirit armor and using spiritual weapons and maybe draining HP and stuff to fuel their combat abilities.
Yeah.
But it's just, go
Since
ahead.
necromancers they don't have an armor limitation, you could make a multi-classed necromancer fighter who wears heavy armor, fights people on the battlefield, and drains the life of the people that surrender or the people that are trying to escape or flee. That it could be really cool, especially if you have unholy strength and you wade into battle, and then there's a giant and you unholy strength yourself up to 18-100 and fight the shit out of these things.
Mousefur used that to pretty good effect. If you had a few higher strength points to begin with, it could be even better. Or if you just if you knew that you had a big battle coming, it was kind of hard to predict how long you'd need it. But if you knew you had a big battle coming, you had to give up HP for unholy strength, right?
Yeah.
So having really high con or a warrior multi-class could give you a larger HP pool.
And then you use that with the heart eating
or something crazy.
Yeah.
And eating hearts.
Then you could just become a really badass tanky warrior, but then goes around eating people's hearts and souls, and you sort of maybe that's how you get Vlad the Impaler. He's the fighter necromancer multi-class. Yeah,
and you can even imagine minions of the necromancer getting the benefits of these abilities, or just using that sort of thing, or or tossing that into campaign. Spiritual weapon can be enchanted and handed off.
Right.
So so you can have a fighter that tags along with a necromancer and wields the spiritual weapon and gets this unholy strength. I guess the spirit armor is just on the necromancer, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
So,
let's see. I want to touch
another.
Oh yeah. Which one do you want to talk about?
This is a more general thought. I think it lends itself to the success of this character, but it also goes to show why every D&D campaign isn't like this. The experience of playing this class was, for lack of a better word, very, very dark. right? Like it was sometimes challenging, and you would see me, I think, during RPing sometimes struggling between third and first person, and finding it really awkward to describe like, I don't know, dark or whatever, to be describing in first person, eating souls and sacrificing babies to dark gods and necromancy, right? It didn't, it felt evil, right?
Super evil.
Which is kind of fun. By the end, it's a little draining, or it could, has its effects on the player, right? Which I think is a feature, not a bug, but I think that attests the success of the class construction.
I do too. I think a good role-playing game should at points give you pause and make you have to be like, wait a minute, hold on, my character's doing this. I'm like, there should be some interplay and some interesting effects from a good role-playing game.
You see this in standard campaigns when you're like having those moral questions. Do I murder everyone at the tavern? Do I not? What's the difference between a goblin and me anyways? But this was one step further across the line, right? Is it okay to eat the baby soul? What if it's super optimal and it gives you the most years out of all the human sacrifices?
Yeah.
It's the soul.
Yeah, that's fun. Speaking of eating souls, I want to highlight another feature. The level 10 Vampiric Feast is another Necromancer ability. It's very similar to the Necromancer ability of Drain Life. It's sort of like a souped-up version, which you get at 10th level. But instead of just like touching a creature and draining their life, to get more of the evil, dark theme and like get closer to the life source itself, I'll just read it to you. By drinking the blood of another living creature, the Necromancer heals and restores themselves. With a willing target, the caster can drain 8 HP per round. With an unwilling target, the caster can drain 1d8 HP per round. For every hit point drained, the caster gains 1 HP. So the regular drain life is you drain 2 points of life just by touching to gain 1. And Vampiric Feast, instead of just touching them, you actually like drink their blood to get a 1-to-1 ratio. If the target is of the same species as the caster, they can instead convert the drained HP into life force at a rate of 1 year gained per 2 HP drained. Where, as we've seen before, the original Eat Soul is 1 year for 10 years. And so this is 1 year of life for 2 HP. Which brings up a lot of interesting things, which we'll get to in a moment. Those that make use of the spell may conflate the euphoria of gaining HP or years with the taste of blood, and gain a taste for it at best, or an addiction to it at worst. And this, to me, like, brings up some really interesting stuff, because if you can drain people's life to give you years, and it has no HP or SP cost to it, then if you get like a group of people who are your willing servants, you can go and like drain some HP from them to boost your years, then let them rest and recover, and then you can just sort of like feed on people indefinitely without ever having to kill someone to gain your years, or to gain your HP back.
Do they have does the victim have to be willing?
Nope. If they're willing, you go. It's just a faster rate. And if they're unwilling, it's a slower rate. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other really cool things in
Yeah,
here.
the high-level abilities are cool. Kind of spoilery. I don't know how many. I'll let you decide which ones.
Man, I want to talk about them all, Ryan. Let's fucking do it. Let's do it. Say whatever you want. Say whatever you want. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
I mean, I want to read some of the higher level abilities, but I was going to mention a lower level ability that I spotted while I was searching for Vampiric Feast was the Phantom Feast, which we didn't see in Mousever's campaign. But I think that's an example of a cool, inspiring whatever ability from this class that doesn't necessarily need to be you can introduce that into a campaign without playing with the full-blown Necromancer class. The Phantom Feast was the Necromancer giving their body to followers to feast upon or whatever, and they had the fun. I don't know if fun is the right word. Here's me getting into that dark place again, right? The side effect of developing a taste for human flesh. I mean, because who doesn't love a little bit of cannibalism in their Dungeons and Dragons?
You want to read out the ability to people so they know what you're talking about?
Phantom Feast was I think we probably talked about this during the campaign, but I'll go ahead and read it off. By presenting a part of their body and declaring a feast, the caster imbues themselves with magic. Caster and a number of people equal to the caster's level may eat the flesh of the caster. Each person needs but one mouthful of flesh to nourish them for a week, although the spell does not stave off effects of dehydration. The caster takes an amount of damage equal to the number of people who feast, plus 3. Interesting, okay. The caster's flesh regrows quickly, but the damage they take is real, cannot be healed by magical means. Creatures one size larger deal more damage, smaller creatures deal less. It is not uncommon for creatures who use the spell to develop a taste for human flesh, assuming the caster is human. Those who survive on the spell for too long may find themselves repulsed by normal food.
Which is nice if you have a party. You know, it's one of the few party abilities that the Necromancer has.
Right.
Yeah.
I could have totally seen this coming in Frozen Frontier.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, like if you had pulled Ferris off screen and been like, look, here's the spell that I'll let you drop at some point by surprise in the campaign. Convince the party to eat your flesh and stave off the hunger through the blizzard.
Oh. If only we had made this class before Frofro ended. Would have happened.
Missed opportunities. Oh well. So, we probably teased long enough. Let's read some of the higher level abilities.
Sure.
You want to do those honors, or were you trying to avoid responsibility?
I'll start with Soulbind, another level 10. I believe this is a spell. Yeah. So, it costs 5 years to cast, and it reads: the eyes are the window to the soul, and by the means of this spell, the caster enchants their own eyes. When a person with a soul looks into the caster's eyes, their spirit becomes intertwined with the caster's on a small level. The target is allowed a saving throw to negate. If the target fails, they feel a deep, personal but unspoken connection to the caster. The effects will fade over the course of 1 week per caster level. If at any point during this effect the target makes eye contact with the caster again without the spell being cast, the bond is renewed and strengthened. Further castings create a more intense bond, eventually achieving a thrall-like state. The more the target is bound to the caster, the less extreme their own emotions. Deeply bound individuals may be listless and without purpose when left to their own devices, barely sustaining themselves. At no point in time can the caster directly control the actions of those bound to them. So this sort of creates a... you're almost not quite stealing their soul, but you're wrapping your target's soul around yours and sort of like weakening them on their own like spiritual level until all they do is kind of stand there and obey what you tell them to do. When I was thinking of this, writing this, I was thinking of... Did you watch Doctor Who, Ryan? Did you watch a lot of Doctor Who?
I am not what do they call Doctor Who
Whovians,
fans? I don't know if I've ever even really... I've seen like 1 or 2 episodes of Doctor Who ever. I'm not a Whovian.
Okay, well there's this one monster in Doctor Who called the Silence. And the way that they work is like they've existed on Earth for a long time. If you can never remember them. Like if you see them, they're weird, but the moment you look at them, you've forgotten their entire existence. But they also make you very subjective. They make you, what is it called? Susceptible to suggestion. So they've sort of like existed among people for all time and have been shaping the course of human history to try and like get humans to do certain things because people will listen to what they say but then never remember them. And there's one person in particular that the party in Doctor Who runs into who's like running this orphanage, but the orphanage like closed 20 years ago, but he thinks the kids are still there because he's surrounded by these Silence guys who are like constantly looking at him, and he's like following their orders and then forgetting everything, and he's just like this hollow shell of a man with no real thoughts or personalities, sort of living in this weird past. And I really, really liked that sort of depiction of the thrall state of a person subject to this like thing that looks at you and forces you to do things. So that's where I got the Soulbind from. It's one of my favorite abilities that we didn't get a chance to get to, especially because it's so weakly worded. It leaves a lot of interpretation for the event and what exactly is going on. You know, it's not a charm, it's a deep personal connection, you know, which I guess maybe what charm ought to be, you know?
Yeah. It's a nice take on that, on the charm ability. A necromantic spin on a classic spell, right?
Yeah. That's one I deeply enjoyed. Do you have another one you want to talk about?
Well, the big one here is emphatic focus, and that's like a page of text. Do we even want to read into that?
Yes. It's long. It might be too long to talk about.
Emphatic focus. We'll think about that, and then Tooth and Claw is the level 12 ability.
Yeah, go for that one. That one's good.
Yeah, this is one I was looking forward to, and this was another one that I thought would be good for a fightery type necromancer. So it costs 6 years. By channeling a full year of their life into, in this case, 6 years of their life, right, into a momentary outburst of energy, the caster grows claws and fangs for a turn. The caster is proficient in these melee attacks, dealing d6 damage with them. The spell can be cast instantly and continued without recasting, although each turn it is maintained drains another year or probably 6 years of life. Furthermore, these melee attacks can be made in conjunction with touch spell attacks, allowing the necromancer to cast Tooth and Claw, attack with fangs, hit for d6 damage, cast Vampiric Feast, right?
Draining d8 life.
Their teeth to eat. Maybe even use it. Can you turn them into spiritual weapons as well?
I believe so. That's the next sentence,
so if
actually.
Got more years into it, you could get an extra d6 necrotic damage with them. Since the teeth and claw, right? Since they're living or once living, they can be enchanted with spirit weapon. Yeah, that's the next sentence.
Right.
Although spiritual weapon cannot be cast in the same round as other spells.
Right. So you couldn't cast Vampiric Touch and Spiritual Weapon, but you could cast Tooth and Claw at the same time as you cast Spiritual Weapon, and you do like a big Spiritual Weapon, so it'll last for 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah,
and then you'll be doing 2d6 or 3d6 or whatever damage, and then you can also, you know, Vampiric Feast and drain life, or whatever other abilities. And that kind of turns you, at this point, around the level 9, 10, 11, 12 is where you start merging into actually being able to be a solo fighter or a solo character on your own. Yeah.
Making a beast of yourself to feast. I bet if you lawyered real hard, or maybe devised another spell, you could maybe argue that you could extend these claws like perhaps 6, even 10 feet away from your person. Reach out. Monstrous troll-like vampires.
Reach out from beyond the grave and drag people into it with you.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. We also
have
Mind Over Matter. It's an 11th level ability. This ability projects the target's spiritual force throughout their body. This shuts down all bodily functions, healing, heat generation, aging, etc., and renders the target resistance to all non-magical sources of damage. There's an asterisk next to non-magical, which we'll get to later. As the soul is self-repairing, damage sustained by the target heals at 1 HP per turn. A turn is 10 rounds in 2nd edition. Furthermore, as the target's spirit is masking their body, they become very sensitive to silver and unable to move against it. A single thread of silver draped over the torso of a fallen target would prevent them from moving, and the target would be unreflected in a mirror since, you know, they don't interact with silver well. And mirrors are, in the olden days, silver polished really well. This silver sensitivity lets weapons made fully of silver, not just lined with it, cause full damage to the target. The spell is permanent once cast. Resisting targets must pass a saving throw versus spell. The spell takes a week of prep time in a special place, a full day of casting, and a recovery period of about an hour. So Mind Over Matter allows you to transform yourself into something that will regenerate quickly, but then has all these other weaknesses in the same vein of the other things we've had, now you don't just have the vulnerability to sunlight or to high magical sources or running water, but now you gain this vulnerability to silver. You can be weighed down by it. You're not going to see a reflection in a silver mirror, but you will regenerate. But you'll also lose all like heat generation, so you'll be cold to the touch. But then you also won't age visibly. And it's one more like step in transforming the Necromancer from a person to like a creature of negative spiritual energy that then like interacts with the world. And that's sort of where the class is going. Once we get to a certain point, you start dehumanizing yourself and turning yourself into like a crazy monster that's super powerful, but like you lose your humanity and your spirit and your soul, and you become vulnerable to all of these like other high energy sources, all these positive energy sources.
A lot of these high level necromantic abilities spells are more like rituals, right? Where you do the prep, do the dark ritual, and forever change your character.
Yeah,
make the sacrifices, and there's no going back.
Yeah, which is pretty different from many of the other character classes, where there's no like personal changes that overcome you, right? A 20th level fighter is just a slightly better stat block. The Necromancer has the option, doesn't need to, but can become an entirely different creature by the end of it. So you start as maybe a plucky human who inherited this kingdom or this barony or whatever, and then by the end of when you're a 20th level Necromancer, you're some sort of like monster that can't go outside and has like weird control over other people and raises the dead and sucks out souls, but like, can't step out into the sunlight and can't wade through running water and isn't reflected in mirrors and is, harmed by silver. And I think we can all see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
And we've been hinting at it for months. Don't say it, though. Don't say it.
You speak the names of the winter gods. They can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
They know you're talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of these types of, I don't know, concepts like this make their way into D&D campaigns narratively, right? The sacrifices to dark gods, right? These dark pacts, whatever, in exchange for boons, right? I mean, like, I don't know. It's not an original idea, but I think it is mechanized well in the context of this class.
Mm-hmm. It definitely wasn't intended to start out this way. I started just writing abilities because I wanted cool Necromancer stuff, and then when I got around near level 8 or 9, I started running out of things, and I was like, well, how does a Necromancer, like a high-level Necromancer, is it still just a regular person? What does it look like? Which is when I started hitting on these, well, you turn yourself sort of into an undead for greater power, which is fascinating to me. I don't know. Yeah. I think it would be fun to play something out far enough that you eventually become like a hermit living in your own abandoned castle, surrounded by your mindless thralls and people you've enchanted and ripped their eyes out and given undead limbs to, controlling your minions from afar.
Yeah, and I think it can probably help you with your NPCs if you play out this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just do that in your prep, right? GM prep.
Yeah.
Like that's more typical, right? To have the evil Necromancer Lord as the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And you give them abilities such as these.
Right.
And playing them out mechanizing them is,
Yeah, one of the other things about Necromancers that for me, thematically, they always have like a nighttime darkness feel to them, right? Like, I don't imagine a Necromancer like skipping down the road in the middle of the day followed by his, skeletons. It doesn't feel right. So I wanted to bring the Necromancer into the darkness, like literally, not just metaphorically. And these things do that.
Yeah. Mummies and liches. I don't know if liches are in there. Mummies are a high-level undead creation. Liches are immortal mages, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. I don't think you would.
You make yourself a lich.
Possibly by the end, yeah. Yeah, certainly.
But mummies are in this class as written.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are mummies and greater mummies and commander knights and skeletal mages. Yeah, the skeletal mage is one I was having trouble figuring out how they would cast spells. Like, where would they just be regular wizards? Do you have to kill a wizard and then raise it as a skeletal mage, or does it get specific, like a set list of abilities?
I assume you would need to raise a mage as a skeletal mage. I don't think you can, or at least some arcane enchanted bones.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You either a mage or some special bone, like some narratively justify, like you could imagine, I don't know, some extra planar whatever bones,
Mm-hmm.
being able to justify making that a mage. But I think the most obvious way is to animate a mage, which Malsfer has been dragging around that mage skeleton for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Currently a specialist, but
right.
And an idea I had would be to use the mage's spellbook in the creation. So like you imbue the skeleton with several of the spells that it had previously,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to not only have the mage, but also have their spell book and, I don't know, burning it in the creation ritual or something, and somehow permanently imbuing them with a few of their known spells.
Mm-hmm.
So like you would make a skeleton, and maybe the skeleton mage only has like a couple spells per day that it gets to use.
Right.
And so once a day, the skeletal mage that in life knew color spray can blow off a color spray, or depending on the level of the caster, or I don't know how many years you give up in creation, or who knows, maybe you roll off spell learn chances to see if you can stick spells in the mage. It's an interesting roads to explore. But
that's what I was thinking too. But the problem I kept running up against was, what happens when you have 5 or 10 skeletal mages? Like, do you have to keep track of all of their individual spells? So I kind of wanted a stat block that you wouldn't have to like micromanage 10 different things, that it'd all be the same one stat block, but I couldn't figure out a way to make that work.
If you don't want to micro 400 skeletons, don't raise 400 skeletons.
That's a good point.
And I think the mass combat system is something that we're probably not even going to talk about today, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Probably not, yeah.
But if you don't want to deal with skeletal mages with stat blocks, you can make a whole bunch of skeletal mages that just have magic missile, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not worry about it.
Yeah.
Or if you have specific needs, then you make a skeletal mage with specific spells.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why so you could record, I've got a skeletal mage that knows magic missile and phantasmal force or whatever, and it's just got its, that's like basically in the name of the creature, right? It's skeletal mage with I think it only has for an NP, for a automaton minion, having just a couple spells is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think the way to do it would be to have them use their HP to cast their spells, so that way they don't have you can cast 5 magic missiles a day, but instead your first level spells cost 1 hit point, your second level spells cost 2 hit points, your third level spells cost 3, or probably 2, 5, 7 or something like that. Some sort of progression, so that way the skeletal mages are limited by their own HP in the same way the necromancer is. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a much more involved minion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Luckily, we don't have to solve that because Malsifer's over, and I don't need to worry about how to make this happen. Yet. Yep. I think it's time to talk about empathic focus, though. Unless you had more that you want to talk about mages with.
No, let's check this one out. Do you want to read it? Should I read it? This is another one of those ritual spells.
Well, I'll start it off, and I think there are many subsets to it. So the general idea with empathetic focus, empathic focus, I don't know how to call it yet, is this. While the spiritual plane is too alien to be understood by mere mortals, including ourselves, an experienced necromancer has many useful insights. The material and spiritual worlds are parallel to one another. So when the body communicates in the material plane with words and gestures, so too does the spirit communicate with emotions. If a necromancer wishes, they can attune their soul to these communications, which has a profound effect on their being. This door, once opened, cannot be shut, and there is no going back. So the idea is, we've got the spiritual plane, the living, the material plane, and you exist in both of them at the same time, and we only really notice what's happening on the material plane, because we are material creatures and we're not really spiritual creatures, so we don't really see what's happening there. But like when I say, "Hey Ryan, what's up?" I'm saying something and I've got like some hand gestures in there, but there's also like the spiritual communication, which we might call empathy, or like emotional communication, which might have to do in the material plane, like you can tell it by tone of voice or maybe context, but that's the roundabout way of like accessing the spiritual communication. And so the idea here is that the Necromancer is now more fully aware of like communication on a spiritual level and not just on a material level, so they can control their spiritual communication with other creatures, with other people, and this has a profound effect on their being. The first effect is emotional numbing. The Necromancer will be feeling all of their own emotions and the emotions around them, of those around them, much more strongly. Even minor emotions can be overwhelming, and the only way to deal with these intense levels of emotion is to desensitize yourself to all of them. So if all of a sudden, if right now we're listening to emotions through the vague, like they're from the spiritual plane, but we're in the material plane, so we don't we're sort of in tune with emotions, and then the Necromancer can really hear them, it's going to be loud. It's going to be like a big cacophony of emotional noise, and so the only way to handle it is to just kind of like numb yourself to everything, and so you become sort of like an emotionally numbed character by interacting with this, which is a hard thing to RP, I think. It's definitely a major character change. And the other part of emotional numbing is the intense feelings. When a Necromancer does engage with an emotion, they deal with it in its extremes. So hunger, which is sort of an emotional state, becomes ravenous. Anger becomes murderous. Sadness is like soul-wrenching. So if the Necromancer does not numb himself to something, whatever he feels or she feels is widely and strongly magnified. Do you want to talk about emotional and passive projection?
Yeah, get into the good stuff. So that all is nice, I don't know, narrative. Emotional projection. As emotions are just a form of communication, the Necromancer can project theirs onto others, just as one can shout over another speaking. So you can speak on the spiritual plane, projecting emotions. When the caster projects an emotion, they force the target to make a willpower save, probably adjusted for the level of the Necromancer. Maybe the Necromancer's own willpower, maybe it's like an opposed willpower save.
Yeah.
Or become overcome with emotion. Characters currently opposed to the Necromancer may save with a bonus ranging from 10 to 20. Elves and other empathetic creatures have advantage on this save. The easiest emotion to project are fear, desire, and indifference. Creatures feeling fear either flee or fight with penalties, -2 to hit and damage. Other emotions need context to be understood. Is the Necromancer causing sexual desire while trying to seduce the target? Are they causing greedy desire while discussing a reward or payment given to a hireling? Are they causing hunger desire while inviting someone for dinner? Careful consideration needs to be taken when projecting emotions. Other emotions can be projected but are saved against with a significant bonus. So the main mechanical thing here is being able to project fear, but then there's also a bunch of RP related emotions to project.
Yeah, and I think the fear is the obvious, fun, mechanical advantage, but the other things are the like more interesting RP advantage. At least to me, where like you want to get someone to do something and maybe don't want to outright bribe them, so you can sort of like you can sort of almost charm them in a similar way that we had the the Soulbind thing, but you like project emotions onto them to maybe try and manipulate their background stuff to get them to do what you want them to do or whatever, or at least like cause emotions to arise in people which they may interpret in fun ways. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, some other benefits, side effects, features of this empathetic focus. Passive perception,
Projection.
Passive projection and perception coming up.
I see. Yeah.
Projection is when not trying to project an emotion, the Necromancer still speaks more clearly to others on the spiritual plane. So you are more in tune with the spiritual plane. And this has the effect of people taking notice of them more. With a little practice, this passive projection can be attuned in one direction or the other, giving them a light aura of emotion. This could be mistaken for being highly attractive, desire, cause discomfort, fear, or discontentment, indifference. So others are innate or subconsciously sensitive to the spiritual power of an empathetic necromancer.
Right. So a necromancer with this empathic focus in play, walking down the street, if they are passively projecting desire, then like as they walk down the street, people are like, wow, look at that fucking hottie. Holy shit, they're so attractive. Wow. Or if you're sort of like trying to project fear, you might walk down the street and everyone's just weirded out and creeped out by you and you want to walk away. Or you know, if you project indifference, then maybe they're just sort of like frustrated or discontented by you. You know? Yeah.
And the passive perception is, in the company of others, the necromancer can detect unconcealed feelings directed at them. So you would be able to detect if someone is angry at the necromancer, blah, blah, blah. Characters actively suppressing their emotion may remain undetected.
Right. So
don't think about how hot Lord Winter is.
Which gives you the ability to walk into a room and immediately, like, that person is here to kill me. I can feel their anger and hatred towards me. I know it right away. Sort of like allowing the necromancer to witness the world around them on a different plane altogether, which I think is super fun.
And emotional reading. By staring into the eyes of another character and listening to their soul carefully, the caster can read the character's emotions with exacting detail, bordering on reading their mind. Target character gets a willpower save. If eye contact cannot be maintained, a grip on a vital part of the character may suffice. A character who understands what is happening can actively resist and makes their save a +10.
Right, so you can like look into someone's eyes and know what they're thinking, or if they're trying to resist, you like grab them by the neck and still like, you know, read what their emotions are on a very deep level, which...
And then, another bug is this personal space.
Let me do the personal space one, because that one was the hard one. That one was difficult to write. But the idea is that all creatures have a sense of personal space, which the necromancer can feel very closely. You know, personal space is a thing. We all have it. We're all aware of it, but we're not, you know, it's an unspoken thing. It's on the spiritual plane. So the necromancer knows exactly how far someone's personal space extends and exactly when they push up against it. And this ought to be a minor footnote along with other interesting effects of communing on the spiritual plane, except for one major thing, right? Who really cares about knowing where someone's personal space is? Except for blessings of the gods. Any consecrated space is scattered with bits of life force and acts as like a blinding wall of white noise should the necromancer enter into it. Because now you're connected more to the spiritual plane, so extra life force and spiritual force tend to interact poorly. In practice, this prevents the necromancer from entering sacred areas and causes them pain and discomfort when presented with sacred objects. Perhaps most important of all is the blessing of Nerul, the goddess of the home, the hearth, family, and society. Unbeknownst to most people in daily life, Nerul blesses each and every home that is actively lived in. This protection is that feeling of being home that you get, after you have a long day of work and you're out in the world and you come home and you feel like more relaxed because you're in your own blessed and consecrated personal sacred space. And blessing the home... She blesses each and every home that is actively lived in. This protection is the feeling of being home that people get. A certain comfort and ease that is so elementary we barely notice it when we have it and desperately want it when we don't have it. Unlike other sacred spaces, the blessing on the home is only a problem for the necromancer when the necromancer is an outsider. If the members of the home are favorable to the necromancer or have invited the necromancer within their own confines of personal space, the blessing ignores the necromancer, which effectively prevents necromancers that have attuned with empathetic focus from entering any sort of consecrated space that they weren't invited into. So they wouldn't be able to enter into temples or holy grounds or people's homes unless that personal space was, implicitly permitted. And I think at this point it's become too obvious who necromancers end up being, or what they end up being, sort of. And that was an ability that I really wanted for the necromancers. This ability, this delving so deeply into things that you get rejected by regular aspects of society, with some areas around it, and some other really cool features of being able to work on a empathetic level of
spiritual level.
Yeah. And that's the idea for where this goes.
Yeah, I think this has been a good wrap up of the class.
Mm-hmm.
Have any parting words? Is there anything you want to clarify? I don't think we've seen the last of necromancy here on Dicing with Death, or
certainly not
here in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, or the world of Arcadia. But
yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is about it. We've sort of settled it by now. I don't think there's anything else left to say about the Necromancer. I think I will publish this PDF, but when you look at it, remember that this is not even a beta build. This is like the pre-alpha, still in development build for this thing. And if any of you ever do end up playing a Necromancer with this character class, I would absolutely love your feedback, because it's been fun to make and it was really fun to run. But if any other people play it, I want to know what it's like for you to play this. Is it, how did your campaign go? Did you find something to be too overpowered or too underpowered? Granted, I'll probably ignore all of your balance feedback, because I value my own opinion too much. I'm too self-centered to care what you think, really. But I do want to know how it works out for you and what you get out of it.
Deep malaise overshadows your whole life, or if you find yourself sensitive to sunlight, if you get a sunburn in the coming months, or if you find your arms growing slowly longer,
reaching out from the grave to grab you,
let us know in the YouTube comments.
Yeah.
Twitch chat right now. I guess you can't be playtesting right now as we're going.
Yeah.
The disco. Show up in the disco.
That's a good one. And I guess
chat about some necromancy.
Shit.
That's yeah.
Cancel.
Don't do it.
I almost printed the document.
This will probably be somewhere on regalgoblins.com at some point. Is that where it's going?
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't figured out. I just now decided to do this, so.
Okay. Impulse decision. Aren't you glad we caught him live and got him to agree to share this? The alpha notes.
Oh, god damn it. It did print it. I tried to cancel the print job before it printed, but it's too late.
So if you would like to playtest this character, show up at Neal's house. He just printed out a copy for you.
Yeah.
Or even, I could see looking at the PDF, and even if there's one ability that's the villain that I'm working on for my campaign would be sweet with this ability.
Mm-hmm. This is the place. Yeah.
Throw with a withering touch into your campaign, or use a Neal. I really like the mini, the Neal. I like the ghoul in this in this character more than the stock 2e ghoul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one thing we talked about this, I think, at the time, that was interesting about running undead minions versus living minions, is you can sort of disconnect from them, not worry about their lives or imagining people dying. But blowing up skeletons' heads is super fun.
Right, because when you have an army, or you get your dogs and you want them to be in combat and then they die, it can feel kind of sad or frustrating. Like, you went through all this RP to get these people and now they're all gone. But here, you just fucking raise minions and throw them at people, and it's delicious, right?
Right, yeah, and I think the skeletons and the zombie stat blocks and stuff that you've got here were more fun than stock. Maybe a little more complicated, but like having the skeletons taking double damage from bludgeoning and blowing up skeleton heads was a fun way to run things. Big, tanky, strong zombies with that 18-90 strength.
Mm-hmm.
There's cool stuff here. I
don't know what's going on,
well,
but for
this is an announcement. Yeah, what are we glitching?
Yeah. I'm trying to link the
flames?
document to people, but whenever I put the document in Twitch chat, it just doesn't send as a message. Like, maybe Twitch won't let me send Dropbox links?
Maybe Twitch has banned necromancy. They know what dark secrets you're trying to spread, Neal.
Send it over here? Interesting. If I send it through OBS, it sends, but if I send it through the actual Twitch dashboard, it doesn't send. That's so weird.
So if you're watching Twitch chat, there's a link to it. Is that going to be available post Twitch? Or
yeah, I will put it on Regal Goblins.
So
yeah.
If you're watching the VOD, track that down. I don't know. It's probably in the Discord already. It's probably
Yeah.
You can find it if you're interested.
Now, there's one more thing, as far as I know, that we can talk about here, and that's what is next for Dicing with Death. What do we have?
A new character, don't we? Isn't that how it always goes? Once one dies, we're on to the next. Or once you make a necromancer that's unkillable, you retire them and move on to the next.
So, in typical Dicing with Death format, we switch off back and forth. I believe that's what we would be doing this time, right?
Yeah.
You will be DMing, I'll be playing.
Character?
Yeah, I will play. I would happily play a character.
Sweet. Let's at least give you... Do you want to roll up stats so you've got something to work with and think about? Or do you want to just do the whole character creation another time?
Well, before deciding on that, are we going with a berserker? Is that the class?
If you're into it.
Oh, buddy. Am I into it? Of course I'm into it.
All right. Next character will be a berserker. Maybe for VOD's sake, we're gonna bring the cut here, right?
We'll cut here.
Nice necromancy chat. If you're watching live, there will be at least a little bit of berserking on the other side of the break, but probably tune in next week for the
actual session. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna take a break, and we'll come back and roll some stats, and start playing with the berserker. So see you on the other side. Bye.
Bye-bye.